Oh yeah, oh, what a night.
All through the 1970s, during his bachelor years, Prince Charles dated a truly prodigious number of beautiful women. The press called them Charlie's Angels, although some of them turned out to be less angelic than they seemed.
Prince Charles was an attractive figure, but I think even more so, the Prince of Wales was an attractive figure. And like most red-blooded young men, he sort of lay back and thought, well, let them come on in.
The heir to the throne was widely seen as the most eligible bachelor in the world.
It is a little bit of a fairy tale, isn't it? That you're in the presence of the prince. So yes, lots of girls used to come up to the polo and hopefully, you know, would be able to chat to him.
But in his 11-year search for a wife, Charles would be increasingly hemmed in by the demands of his job and the expectations of his family. The choice of woman to marry could not be entirely his.
The most important role in Prince Charles's life is as a stallion. He's the heir, he has to produce his own, and you need to do that by marrying.
Any prospective wife would have to please not just Charles and his family, but also the British public. As Charles's son and heir, Prince William, enters his 20s, speculation about his future love life has been growing. Commentators have wondered about the guidance both the young princes must be receiving from their father. As Charles himself would recognise, we have all been here before.
I don't think his sons will go down the road that the father went down. They're obviously quite dutiful towards the royal job, but I don't think they feel that their life should be destroyed because of it.
In June 1969, the 20-year-old Prince Charles, still at university, gave his first ever television interview. He was already being asked about marriage.
Because it's also difficult because you've got to remember that when you marry, in my position, you're going to marry somebody who perhaps one day is going to become queen. And you've got to choose somebody very carefully, I think, who could fulfill this particular role. Because people like you perhaps would expect quite a lot from somebody like that. And it's got to be somebody pretty special.
Prince Charles graduated from Trinity College, Cambridge in the summer of 1970. He was destined for a career in the Navy. Until then, he plunged into the leisured pursuits of the British upper classes. He particularly excelled at polo.
A lot of single, unattached girls come to polo matches to pick up the man of their dreams. And they are described by players as Chukka Charlotte. It does have a very dashing image. There's a lot of Pimm's drinking and there's a lot of chatting up. There's the thunder of hooves and a lot of sweat and a lot of swearing and knocking about.
Just how much I care.
It was the polo circuit that enabled the prince to experience a faster, racier set than the stuffy world he'd known. The man who helped Charles do this was Luis Basualdo, Argentinian captain of the prince's team, the Golden Eagles.
Luis was a person who could provide women for Prince Charles.
The bounder, as he was called.
He had a whole stable full of very pretty, extremely young girls.
He thought I was some sort of a playboy, wishful thinking. I wish I were, but he must have thought so. And that I could help him, introduce him. He was a very macho type of person, funny enough. He didn't look that way, but he was very kind at first, but then he was energetic, wiry, strong, dominant. And he liked an equally strong woman.
As Charles settled into this hedonistic world, he found surprising support from within the royal family itself. His closest family confidant, Lord Mountbatten, Uncle Dickie, was all in favour of Charles playing the field.
Mountbatten explicitly said that if Prince Charles wanted to sow wild oats, well, by all means sow them, but have them out of the way and then find some nice, innocent, pure, suitable, preferably English girl and marry her. I mean, in principle, it sounded awfully good.
Mountbatten's advice would prove crucial to Charles in the decade ahead.
He was much more like a father's figure to him. And he was a man, a real mentor. He really looked up to him. He paid much more attention to his Uncle Dickie than to his father.
It was at a polo match in the summer of 1971 that Charles met the first great love of his life, Camilla Shand. While he was stroking one of his ponies after a chukker, she approached the 22-year-old prince and said, "That's a fine animal, sir."
Very sexy, very sexy. She gave off the impression that she knew what she was doing, and I think some men like that.
One night in October 1972, Charles and Camilla spent the evening dancing at Annabelle's, an exclusive discotheque in Mayfair.
He felt it was a fun relationship. And I don't think fun is something that he had a huge amount of in his youth. And he fell pretty soundly in love with her.
But Camilla Shand had another reason for seducing the Prince of Wales. For the past 5 years, she had been involved with a handsome guards officer called Andrew Parker Bowles.
Andrew Parker Bowles was very good looking. He was a cavalry officer. He looked tremendous in his uniform and on a horse. Andrew had been mucking around with Princess Anne, and that irked her. And I think there was an element of tit for tat. Well, you know, you can see Princess Anne, well, I'll see her brother.
Charles spent the night after Annabelle's at Camilla's ground floor flat, round the corner from Victoria Station, while his bodyguards waited outside in the car. But he was to leave on naval duty within weeks.
I mean, if we could all put the clock back. You meet people, your character isn't developed enough, your whole sense of where you are, what you're going to do is not developed. You think, I mean, these are big, big steps. Whether he would have been allowed to think that he could ever marry a girl like Camilla Parker Bowles, I don't know, but I would suspect not.
9 months later, Camilla married Andrew Parker Bowles. Charles, marooned on a frigate in the Caribbean, wrote to his uncle Mountbatten, "I expect the feeling of emptiness will pass, eventually."
He was absolutely heartbroken. He was a man who really wore his heart on his sleeve, and he gave it. He fell in love very easily and very deeply. But he couldn't understand. He thought he'd had such a warm and rewarding and fun friendship, and that it was all gone.
Charles now embarked on a series of short-term relationships with aristocratic young Englishwomen. On leave from the Navy, he was dating Georgiana Russell, seen here presenting a fashion show on Brazilian television. She was the daughter of the British ambassador to Spain. Georgiana was invited to spend the weekend at Craiggowan, Charles's Scottish fishing lodge. It was an important step towards a full-blown invitation to meet Charles's parents up at the castle itself. Palace staff called this the Balmoral Test.
It's the dull, Balmoral, boredom, wet, damp all day. Let's go and chase a stag across a hill for 12 hours. Let's go and watch the water and nobody will catch a fish for 2 days. I mean, the girls were worn down through some of that.
Charles's valet throughout his bachelor years, Stephen Barry, died in 1984. But he left behind a gossipy memoir of life with the prince. His description of Georgiana Russell's weekend at Craiggowan makes clear how doomed he thought the relationship was.
She was freezing cold and eating scraps. Prince was on one of his economy drives. I think she thought the weekend would be rather glamorous. Nothing of the sort. He was standing with his feet in icy water all day, fishing, while she was going bored out of her mind. She's not going to last the course, I said. And I was right. She didn't. She went home.
I think he could have been a very difficult man to go out with. For, girlfriends, by and large, what they expect is a lot of attention from their bloke. I mean, he was attentive, he could be attentive, and he was very romantic and he loved their company. But because of who he is and the way he's been brought up, he's a very self-centred man.
Charles's girlfriends always called him Sir. In moments of intimacy, they were encouraged to call him Arthur.
Just call me Arthur.